Update. Told my fiancé I never wanted kids from day one, then his sister had a baby and he started calling me mama, part 2. I'm going to try to make this as chronologically accurate and concise as possible. If something is unclear, I'll clarify in the comments. The first thing I did after my last post was get a blood pregnancy test. It was negative. That night, I also spoke to my mom. I wasn't comfortable sharing every single detail, so I left some things out, but she told me she supports me and that I can stay with her for as long as I need. I also talked to my sisters. They admitted they never liked the idea of me dating someone so much older, but they didn't want to push me because they know me. If they did, I'd probably get angry, distance myself, and become even more dependent on him. I apologized for overreacting to everything and assured them that they should never hesitate to tell me if something feels weird or wrong. I called my boss and gave him a more family-friendly version of the story. He was absolutely livid, not only with him but also with me for not telling him sooner. He's like my work dad and was the one who requested I join him. He said he didn't bring me to a foreign country without intending to take care of me. He promised to pull some strings to get me a position at the office in my country since my former position was already filled. He also told me that if I wanted to get my things back, I could go back on a Saturday and he would accompany me. After thinking about it, I decided to go back. It might seem silly, but I had spent a lot of money on K-pop photo cards, albums, mangas, and I didn't want to start my collection from scratch. So, I spent a couple of days with friends and visiting family, realizing how lonely and isolated I felt in a foreign country, even though it's not that far from home. I knew I could never leave my family like that again. Even my dog seemed happier spending every afternoon cuddling with my mom. I also visited my father's grave. I've always hated cemeteries and avoided them, but I needed him in that moment. I went alone, brought fresh flowers, cleaned a little, and just sat there talking to him. I told him none of this would have happened if he hadn't passed away. I cried a lot, and then I laughed like a crazy person. I ended up staying for about 3 hours, but it felt so healing. I also went to my mom's gynecologist and she said it was possible to get a tubal ligation, especially considering my health issues. She warned me it could take about 6 months, but I was okay with the wait. I felt so free after that appointment and just so much happier being home. I didn't even think about my ex until he messaged me asking about my mom. I told him she was doing better and that I'd be back on Saturday. I decided to talk to him face to face since I was already going back to collect my things. On Friday afternoon, my sister lent me her car and I drove back. It's almost a 12-hour drive, but with breaks, it took about 14 hours. I went straight to my boss's house, and when I arrived around 9 a.m., he asked me to have breakfast with him and his family. Afterward, he and his son came with me to my ex's house to help pack up my things. I even got some of my favorite plants. They made fun of my taste in music, and we finished in about an hour and a half. Afterward, I went to my ex's sister's house. I needed to know if the whole baby incident had been a setup. I knew she didn't work on Saturdays, so I went to her house. Luckily, she was home and invited me in. We sat in awkward silence for a moment until I asked her, "Did my fiancé ask you to make me hold the baby?" She replied, "What? No. Why? What even happened that day? When I went downstairs, you weren't there, and he said you got sick and had to leave." I explained what had happened, and she was furious. She started crying and apologized for leaving me with the baby. I apologized for